So my name is Joel Rivera, and I'm the Chief of Police for the Weslaco Police Department. We are in a $9.3 million facility. The Weslaco Police Department, the newly Weslaco Police Department, I should say. We started operations here October 13th, Friday the 13th, 2023, and it is a 37,000 square foot building, and it's designed to be a 30-year facility. We took some of the things from our old building that was a pre-9/11 building and remedied some of that stuff into this building. So now this building works for us, not against us. So now we don't need as much personnel to move inmates. Now we have, security in place. All those little things that new buildings should have. We made sure we did that, and future-proofed this building to be a 30-year building. And so it's exciting for us to be able to come in here. In the old building, we were kind of on top of each other, right? I mean, all kinds of operational inefficiencies. And now, with this building being new to us, we can realize those inefficiencies and make them efficiencies. And so we can actually provide better police service to our community. Our old building was over 40 years old. And one of the things was that investigations was in a small, cramped building, not much bigger than the one we're in now. And investigators had to sit side by side, and sometimes an investigator's dealing with a suspect, and sometimes in the very next cubicle, an investigator's dealing with the victim. And that victim is having to pour out their heart to almost be victimized for the purposes of criminal prosecution, right? We don't do anything in a vindictive manner, but we need information from them. And so when the investigator sits and questions the victim and talks to them about the particular incident, we want to treat that victim with the utmost respect. But we weren't able to do that because they're having to relive the crime that they experienced in front of other people, right? And it can always be embarrassing. There was certain crimes that investigators did their best to bring them in after hours when nobody was around, the sexual assaults, those kind of, but that takes special circumstances. Now, when we interview victims of crime, we do that in a safe space through a grant that we got. We have a therapy dog, right? And so, your brain is going through this process of reliving details, right? And it raises anxiety. Anxiety causes memory issues, those kind of things. So we have a therapy dog that helps them deal with stress. This dog's nose isn't trained for drugs. It's not trained for a patrol dog. All it does is smells cortisol levels. And it knows when you're going through a stress situation, and he's just there to help you de-stress. And so he is available to victims of crime. And so we can do this in this space now because now we have room for that. We're a medium-sized police agency. We're on nearly 90 officers. It's a community of about 50,000 residents here. We're essentially a border community, a border town, in that there is about a 4 or 5 mile gap between the actual physical border, the Rio Grande River, and our city limits. And so what we're seeing here today is, and it's kind of a continued theme over the last, I've been in law enforcement for over 20 years, and I'm gonna say it's been consistent, is that our community is a transition point. So when there is human smuggling that comes into this, they don't stay long. They may hide out in housing, temporary stash houses, we call them. They stay here, but this isn't where they're coming to stay or work or live or anything like that. This is where they come as a transition point to their bigger hubs, such as Houston. Houston's a big transition hub. On nearly every migrant that comes through here, whether legal or illegally, is not gonna stay here. They're going to a bigger city, right? A city that provides them some level of anonymity. They're looking for work or they're looking for something, right? And so this is just a transition point. Similarly, that's what we see in drugs. Right? We have drugs come in, and in recent years, the marijuana, the traditional marijuana market has fallen off because of legalization within the United States. But, the cocaine, the fentanyl, the meth, that kind of stuff that's coming through from Mexico is a transition point here. And it's a transition point here because they want to get it to larger markets. The larger the markets, the more farther north of the border, the more they make in profit. So a gram of cocaine here is not the same as a gram of cocaine in New York or Michigan or whatever, right? They're looking to maximize their profits. And the bigger markets, the more users. that they can transition. And so that's what we see coming through here. Now, this is also a transition point for weapons. We talk about drugs going north, but weapons and cash going south. It's not intended to stay here. It's clearly intended for use in Mexico. So they get it as close to the border as possible, and then they organize to be able to move it from here over there. So this is a transition point. There are stash houses for money. There are stash houses for weapons. Sometimes those criminal organizations interlink because they use the same trafficking routes, right? So it may be drugs going north, but that same trafficking route or method is money coming south, right? So once they get to the transition point here, then that's when it goes through different, hey, this is a stash house for money, this is a stash house for weapons, this is a stash house for drugs. They are becoming more and more of intelligent organizations every day. The state of Texas is, I would say, conservative as compared to other states, right? And so when we're talking about what's coming to the state of Texas as far as illicit activity, I'm going to say globalization has facilitated a couple of things. Here that we see within our community is THC oil, the gummies. Those things are coming from states where it's been legalized, but because of globalization and legal methods of delivery, such as FedEx and UPS and Amazon and all those that our economy has become accustomed to, and kind of on demand, here order today, here tomorrow kind of thing. We're seeing THC and those kind of things coming in and really infiltrating it. We're seeing it in the schools. That's the number one, by far, the number one reason for detention that we're making in our schools. Law enforcement, typically, we're behind, right? And so one of the things that Texas, because marijuana isn't legalized today in Texas. Hemp is something that's legalized in Texas, and hemp and marijuana are differentiated by the level of THC concentration within that, right? So Texas, as it isn't legal, marijuana isn't legal, wasn't prepared to say, hey, well, it's considered hemp if it's below this threshold, so many, microns per deciliter or whatever. Texas didn't have that sensitivity test until last year. Even today, from a law enforcement standpoint, we have a decision point. That's what we test for. So whether it's hemp or it's THC oil that we're looking at decision point. All we care about is over for prosecution purposes, right? So we go on the anecdotal stuff when we interview drug users and saying, well, why are you preferring traditional THC oil over traditional marijuana? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is the potency, right? The stuff that's coming from other parts of the country, it's like hydroponic. It's cultivated to be a particular strength, and so that's one reason. The other reason is easily concealable, right? Because people do vape nicotine. I can tell you within the schools that we have, 90+% are in fact THC oil when we test it. It's less than 10% of the time that we catch a student with a vape pen, it's nicotine. So by far and away, most of the THC, the vape pens that we catch have THC in them. And so the students tell us, hey, we use THC because it's more powerful and it's easily concealable. In fact, our school resource officers are assigned to the district. They work very closely. They develop relationships with students so that way they can, the tips and tricks on how do they conceal those things. There's vape detectors in the restrooms because that's where they mostly do it, because it does provide this puff of smoke or whatever. We interview these kids and we get as much intelligence to be able to take countermeasures from a law enforcement standpoint for detection purposes and then detention and stuff like that. And so we are, during the interviews, we're saying, hey, the potency is just much better. In the state of Texas, possession of a vape pen, just one, is considered a state jail felony. Most of the detentions that we're making are, in fact, on school property, right? So these kids are actually using a substance that will make them a felon caught first offense. That is very concerning. We don't want to place a student on a path to where they're already felons. And so in an effort to combat that, we worked with our district attorney's office and the board of district judges here to allow the police department to have some authority or discretion over this. And what we did was we created a first offenders program. It gives students a second chance when they've made a mistake. They only get one chance at this, right? And so it's an agreement that we draft between us and the students. The parents also have to take ownership of this. That's the requirement of the program. So what we'll do is we'll create a program in which twice a week for 8 weeks, students come in and they take classes. And some of these classes are how to deal with stress management, identification of anxiety and management of anxiety, how to say no, how to deal with peer pressure, the dangers of online, being online. But we separate the students from the parents, and then we give the parents parenting classes, how to have open and honest communication with your child, how to establish boundaries of respect. Those kind of classes that are important and integral to knowing how to be a parent and being able to be a successful parent. There's a couple of things. Number one is that we base the classes that we give our students on surveys that when they come in. So we ask them, well, you were caught with a vape pen, and it's a survey that we use. It's a standardized survey. Every single person that comes through the program answers a survey and saying, well, why are you vaping? Right? And then some of the things that we're finding is that they're self-medicating, they're dealing with anxiety. Some of the things is that they were being peer pressured and they don't know how to deal with peer pressure, right? We had generations before us, like the Just Say No generation during the Reagan era, and we had the DARE generation where we took classes on how to say no. We literally took classes on how to say no. We've left our current young generation behind. And so this is an effort to tell them, hey, this is peer pressure, and this is how you deal with peer pressure. Some of them don't even know what peer pressure is, and those are of concerns, right? So we're giving them life lessons and setting them up for success. They understand how grades impact their future, how their behavior today impacts their future tomorrow, and we place them on a path to get them to be successful. I can say that we have a 91% success rate. That means that only 9% of the students that have ever gone through the program reoffend. And if they reoffend a second time, we submit the case. It is a felony case for prosecution, and we allow it to be dealt with downstream, right? But we do everything we can to put these students on a path to be able to succeed. We've had some tremendous successes, some huge successes. Even today, we have, kids that'll see me in the drive-thru and they'll come up to me and saying, hey, I work here. I'm here at Chick-fil-A. I have a job, sir. And they're proud of it. They're proud of wearing that uniform. And I think that's really, really cool, right? And saying my mom's doing really well. We had a young woman and her mother that refused to speak to each other. And by the time they exited the program, they had a relationship, a mother-daughter relationship, and it was based on respect for one another. Those are success stories that we celebrate here, because if we can just save one, we've done our job, right? I'm gonna say this, the credit goes to the people, the men and women that work at this department. There's the saying, the police are the community and the community are police. And I can say that because we have such a supportive community, we are doing well today from a policing standpoint. You look at the narrative that some organizations, news organizations put out there. As a chief along the border, I look at that narrative and say, that's not entirely accurate. We have historically low crime rate here because this is a transition point. This isn't the point that those people that are coming across to do nefarious actions stay. This is a transition point. We have a community that supports us, local government that supports us. We have well-trained officers along the border. We have a unified goal. Because of all those things, there's not one key to the puzzle. It's all the pieces coming together to be able to produce a border community that has historically low crime rate. Are there people that are coming across the border that are bad actors? Yes, they're coming across the border. That is indisputable. Are they staying here? No. Why are they staying here? Because this community supports law enforcement. They support law enforcement activity. They support law enforcement action. It's not a rush to judgment when a law enforcement action that initially appears wrong. There's no rush to judgment. The community supports us, and by the same token, we have good communication on the way out. Traditionally, law enforcement keeps information in and say, well, we're putting ourselves out there, there's liability for being able to say this, we're going to compromise a case, whatever. At the end of the day, the community needs to know. The community needs to know, going back to the police of the community of the police, right? And so I think that is a recipe that can probably be duplicated. No, most certainly can be duplicated across the country. Communities that actually support their police and back their police. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't hold police officers accountable when they mess up, 100%. But when we allow the community to have a window of voice and we allow them to have good information about what's going on within their police department, they are our biggest ally. They are our biggest supporter. And I think this portion of the country gets unfairly painted sometimes in national media, because I, as the chief of police for the city of Weslaco, I get to see all the reports. I get to know about all the arrests, right? When I go for a jog outdoors, I don't carry a gun because I am that comfortable in my community. I think that this is a beautiful place to live. I think Mexico is a beautiful place. I haven't been there in 20 years. I'll say that, in over 20 years, because it's a dangerous place, but it can be a beautiful country. I think there needs to be a better understanding about what's going on here. And that's why I'm hoping to say this. And I celebrate the successes of this agency and the work that the men and women do, because I've seen firsthand during natural disasters here where one of my police officers gets a call from his wife and saying, hey, we've got over 2 feet of water inside the house is flooding, I need you to come home. And he's told her, I can't come home, there's other people that need me. That is incredible. That is a police officer being a part of his community and genuinely caring for his community. And I think that we need to celebrate some stuff like that. So I think, the shameless plug, man, that goes all to those guys. The guys that do the job. I think that's where it's at.